As you know, in Atmos, an object can be panned anywhere, and Atmos will figure out how to mix it for the speakers available at playback time. But objects are mono, and sometimes we need to pan a multi-channel track, stereo or surround, with the same flexibility. Multi-channel tracks create the illusion of space with sounds already panned within them. Yes, beds are meant for multi-channel tracks, except for one thing. The anchor points are locked to specific locations. For example, a stereo bed only exists on the front left and right channels. This video is about using objects as anchor points. By panning the anchor points, we can move the sound field anywhere. I'll be talking about two techniques today. The first is called object beds. That concept originated with some of the earliest mixers of Atmos music, Steve Genewick and Nick Rives of Capitol Studios. They can both be seen in videos describing this idea. See the links in the description. There were no surround reverb plugins when they started mixing music in Atmos. They had to use multiple instantiations of the same plugin on different planes. So they created the object beds to divide the Atmos space into zones that they could route to individually. The guys at Capitol, like most Atmos mixers, especially Atmos music mixers, they were using Pro Tools. I'm using Nuendo, but I was able to make this version based on Steve Genewick's ideas. So this folder contains the 8 channels that make up the infrastructure. Each channel represents a different plane, as you can see on the panner thumbnails. They are all sources for objects in Atmos. This is the front stereo pair, then the center channel, which is the only channel in this group that is mono, and then we have the wides, the sides, and the rear. Then we have 3 more stereo pairs for the ceiling, front, mid, and rear. And the bigger the dots are, the higher they are in elevation. Here are the 15 objects, all the way through there. And there are no effects on these channels. We can use this same object bed for as many effects as we like. So moving along, these 8 channels each have their own instance of a Lexicon 224 reverb. I happen to be using a small hall here, and all the instances of this plugin use the same settings. You can adjust the reverb to your taste, but since there are 8 instances, I find that you want to turn the system noise emulation off. So a mono bus here feeds all 8 of those channels. In effect, it's a 1 in, 15 out reverb. If I were using a true stereo reverb, I'd want to use a stereo input bus. To further decorrelate the planes, Steve Genewick puts an additional plugin in front of the reverb on every instance. Steve happens to use the Waves H-Delay plugin for this, but I read a comment where someone recommended Echo Boy, and I have Echo Boy, so that's what I'm using here. Whatever you use, the main purpose is to delay the signal going into the reverb by increasing amounts the further we go towards the back. The front plane, which has the left and right plus the center, it doesn't have any delay at all. And we start with a short delay and increase the delay as we go to the rear, and then match those settings for the height. These are the settings for the Echo Boy, based on the settings that Steve Genewick used on the H-Delay. This delay is set to a 1/64th note, and we're using 60 BPM on the plugin, so that works out to a delay of 62 milliseconds. On the side channel, we have another instance, and that one is set to a 1/32nd triplet, and that works out to 83.3 milliseconds. On the rear, we have another instance which has a dotted 1/64th note, and that works out to 93.75 milliseconds. Now this MIDI switch here needs to be turned off on all the instances so that the plugin uses the BPM that's entered here rather than taking it from the DAW. By using the BPM to control the timing, we can adjust the delays for all the instances by using the same note values, but adjusting the tempo on all the instances. In the mixer, if I select all the channels that have the plugin, and I click the Quick Link button, and also the Absolute button, and I bring back the plugins, then I can type any tempo I want, like 90, and it will change on all the instances at the same time. A faster tempo produces shorter delays. So let's listen to the effect. I have a click that has a send into the 224 spread. I'll start the click so you can hear what it sounds like dry, and then I will enable it on the send so you can hear that reverb. You can actually see the delay rippling toward the back subtly. You can also see this with the renderer. If I turn off the reverb but I leave on the Echo Boy, you can see that animation effect kind of in the Dolby renderer. So I'll turn them all back on again. I also have a sample of a vocal. If I enable the send here into the same spread, the reverb spread.
They will come again, and the sky will.
The sides and back sound great on my speakers here, but for me, the reverb in the center and front channels kind of muddies the vocal.
Cry again.
I find it works better if I turn down the send on the front channel and even eliminate it completely on the center channel. That way the voice is more distinct, but we still have plenty of this beautiful reverb again, filling the room.
And the stars will.
But that's just me. If you want to try this for yourself, here's some other ideas for the Echo Boy that you can try to differentiate the planes even more. First of all, high cut darkens the tone, so you can try increasing the high cut the further back the sound goes. Second, you can use the saturation to add harmonic distortion that makes each channel sound even more different from each other. And the style, here I have Studio Tape that has other saturation related choices. Down here you have a tweak button, and the width here adjusts the delay time between the left and right channels, which makes the delay sound even wider. And on the style edit page, all these secret menus here, you can adjust diffusion here, which makes the reverb sound thicker. It's all subject to your own taste. So this is just one reverb here using the 224. You can copy this set of channels and apply different effects, a plate, chamber, whatever, as many as you want. I'm really just getting started with this, and I look forward to experimenting more. There's another term for using objects as anchor points, and it's actually a feature in Nuendo called multi-objects. In Nuendo, we can create a multi-object with a single click. I think in Pro Tools it takes manual configuration to make an object bed. For example, I bought a surround reverb called Cinematic Rooms, which can operate as wide as 716. I did a video on it a while back. Right now I'm going to use the multi-object feature to create a 716 auxiliary channel that can feed that plugin into my Atmos mix. I need to create a group, set the configuration to 7.1.6, set the output to Atmos mix, call it 7.1.6 aux, and click Add Track. The next step is really important. I need to change the default panner to the VST multi-panner. And I'm just going to push that out of the way because now I need to open the Dolby authoring tool and click Add Objects. And this creates a new row, and I go to the drop-down in the source track column, and I select my 716 aux channel. And boom, 13 objects are automatically assigned, numbers 26 to 38. It doesn't create an object for the LFE, which is perfect. Now, you'll notice, by the way, that this interface doesn't say anything about multi-objects, but that's what Steinberg calls it in the Nuendo operation manual and on the forum. Notice that Nuendo does a lot of work behind the scenes. Not only has it assigned as many objects as there are channels in the track, but it also pans all the objects to where they belong. and it routes all the channels from the track to the correct objects in Atmos. Each object has its own panning data. And this feature can work on tracks of any channel width. I don't know of any other DAW that does this. Before I go on, remember I had to switch from the default panner to the VST multi-panner. This part can be very confusing. To add objects, I recommend that you use this button and not this drop-down, Create Objects from Selected Tracks, because that fails for instrument tracks and effects tracks. But you can add those types of tracks by clicking this button, which adds a row, and then in this column you can see all the tracks that will work as objects, and it will include instrument tracks and effects tracks if they're available. But unless a channel has the VST multi-panner, it's not available until you change that. All of these restrictions are true in Nuendo 11 anyway. In theory, I could add cinematic rooms as an insert on this 716 channel I just created, but I might want to use the same bed for something else. If I route cinematic rooms and anything else into this, I won't have to burn 13 objects every time. So I'm going to add an effect channel, set it to cinematic rooms, and leave it at 716, and set the output to the 716 channel I just created. And I'll call this channel Cinematic Rooms and add track. So now I have an effect channel with the cinematic rooms as an insert. Without going into details, I'm using this plugin in a very simplistic way. I'm using a configuration called full surround crossfeed propagation, which is very handy. What it does is, regardless of where the inputs are coming from, what channels they're coming in on, it will generate individual surrounds. I think it's basically a bunch of stereo surrounds on these different planes. So I've got a number of tracks in this mix being sent into cinematic rooms. So this is what it sounds like.
I know, what I fear isn't real, but here in the darkness, it's all I
So you can see
feel.
over here that all these planes have signals on them. That song is actually one of my own. The reverbs on all these different planes are all decorrelated, so it's not just one big mushy thing. It sounds separate and very, very spacious. This tool is a great way to get beautiful reverb filling your room, but I'm using it here in a simplistic way. And because of that, I noticed there was a lot of reverb coming out of the front, which was kind of muddying up the vocal. So I cheated a little bit, which was to mute the output on the center channel and to reduce the output on the left and right channels. And that's what you were hearing. This is a good time to point out that what you're hearing as output is actually just a fold down that Nuendo is doing from the Atmos mix channel, which is 7.1.4, and I can hear that on my speakers here, and it's folding down to a stereo channel that is routing out into OBS, where I'm recording the video and the audio. That's all for now. I have a lot more to cover in part 2, including routing cinematic rooms into the object bed. Stay tuned and stay healthy.